Right now, fixing Albany. There are only about 2 weeks left for lawmakers to work out plans for needed ethics reform. So what fixes will work and what will pass? Our panel will solve what's ailing the state's capital. And then two-state confusion. As Israelis vote for prime minister and parliament, Benjamin Netanyahu says no to a two-state solution with Palestinians. That flies in the face of U.S. policy for more than a generation. So what's next in the increasingly strained relationship between Jerusalem and Washington? And later, March Money Madness. The NCAA play-in games are tonight. Big bucks for the colleges, the networks, the coaches, for everyone except the players. Should that change, and if so, how? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in one more time for Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us. Tonight we're going to solve the problems in Albany, or at least try to. 2 weeks from today, the state's budget is due, and that deadline has become the de facto deadline for any new efforts on ethics reform. And given the time frame and where the key players are in the debate, the Daily News is calling this high noon for Governor Cuomo and the legislature on ethics reform. There are legitimate concerns about reforms being applied equally to legislators and to the governor and other statewide officials, and they are not all seeing eye to eye. Add to that some questions about the individual players. The News making new Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie's taxpayer-funded Jeep Grand Cherokee, around $40,000 worth, a front-page story, and pointing out that the state Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos is facing a possible probe and is yet to answer questions about his legal work that nets him about $350,000 a year. All this as questions swirl over Governor Cuomo's $700,000 book deal, an election loophole that netted him tens of millions of dollars in his campaign war chest. Push for ethics reform now so great, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman is weighing in, seeking reforms even greater than those proposed by the governor or the legislature. There are a lot of ideas being talked about, from banning or seriously improving disclosure of outside income, greater accounting of the per diem expenses, public campaign financing, and all of the other ones that you see on your screen right there. So many that it can get confusing as to figuring out what to do and what wouldn't pass in Albany. So the question is, what reforms does Albany need and what reforms will Albany actually approve? Here to solve Albany is our panel, all of whom I'm proud to call friends and none of whom I'm sure are happy to be described that way. Michael Tobin is an independent political consultant. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. And Tom Doherty is here. He is a Republican strategist, a partner at Mercury, and a former advisor to New York Governor George Pataki. And Tom, let me start with you, with the experience in the executive branch. What would your fixes be for solving the ethical problems in Albany? And do they have to apply equally to the governor and to the legislature?
Well, I mean, I think that it always should apply throughout. If you're the governor, you can't ask the legislature to do something that you're not willing to do, because that would create tension to begin with. Look, first and foremost, they need to get a hold of this outside income issue. It is just a problem, and it has been a problem for a long time, particularly because nobody knows what the outside income is for. If you had a situation where there was full disclosure and transparency, you probably could get away with doing outside work. However, I really think that for legislators, because a majority of them don't have outside income, and those individuals should be fighting for a pay raise and limiting outside income. This is a job, if you want to be a legislator, you should go there to be a legislator. If you want to be a lawyer in life, you should go and practice law. Right now, the system is so bad that we always wonder now, are you taking votes? Are you allowing legislation to come before the body that may be a conflict on your outside income?
Well, Michael, let's get into that. Can you make it a full-time job and ban outside income?
Absolutely.
Sure.
I agree with most everything Tom said. Ban outside income, because you can't serve two masters. You can't have your clients and advance their interests and say, well, I took a referral fee, but I don't work on that case. Well, what they come to your firm for then? Right. But there should be a pay raise, and it should be full-time. And I think the timing of this also needs to be examined, tying it to a budget that everybody wants to get done in a year when the State of the State and the governor's budget address were conflated because of the governor's father's passing. And then transition and turnover with the Speaker of the State Assembly. Who says it needs to be done by April 1st? Let's get it done right. Let's bring the legislature back through October post-budget. Let's bring in experts nationally and talk about what serious, positive, productive reform could look like and implement that.
Dominic, Can this idea pass in Albany, making it a full-time job and doing a pay raise? And how do voters react to it? They're going to get a pay raise, and
I really believe that the public would learn to grow to like this very fast. So I'm in agreement, and everything that's been said here. If you, I mean, let's be honest. What are you hiring these folks for lawyers for? Come on, let's be honest. Tom Doherty said the system has been bad. It's my contention. It's intentionally bad. Intentionally bad. Lawmakers looking out for their own interests. So if you ban all outside income and go up on their salary, let's say, what, $40,000, $50,000, whatever, I really believe that the public would have no problem going along with that, because it would stop this game, if you will, of transparency of, oh, I do $250,000. I know that's an extreme, talking about Skelos, in legal work, but not revealing what you do, and that takes us right along.
But empowering individual legislators, giving committee chairs actual say over things, gives them more responsibility. A lot of these rank and file backbench legislators sit around with nothing to do, so they practice law, or they sell insurance, or they...
And really, look, we've had this debate about term limits, and Florida has a very interesting system where they have a backbench that over a course of time you're rising through that, and it has worked. The argument that you're putting new people into a system, well, then you shouldn't bother running for office. I mean, look, I know I've been part of this system, and all of us have been part of the system for a long time, but we're unhappy about the government, right? People are unhappy about the government. So the idea that we're putting new people in, how much worse could it quite frankly get? Mm-hmm. I mean, the problem is money. And so anybody, you asked a question earlier, can this pass? Mm-hmm. I think it's an uphill battle for it to pass, to say we're going to cut out outside income, because some of the most powerful men there would be cutting off their, but at some point somebody needs to show leadership and say, either I want to be a lawyer or an insurance salesman, or I want to be a legislator.
Andrew, I just want to ask Tom Doherty, as someone who's been very close to a governor, how he would react to this situation. If you were the key advisor, as you were one of the key advisors to George Pataki, but the key advisor to the new Assembly Speaker, would you have signed off on, I'm just asking a question, on him buying a brand new $40,000 vehicle at this given point in time?
No. The problem isn't the problem is the optics of it all, and the problem is that it's not a Jeep for the speaker. The $40,000 in a state budget is meaningless. Okay, the speaker deserves to have a car to get him back and forth. He has to do a lot of traveling, etc. The problem I have is like the old speaker, when he's flying from Albany to Washington D.C. so that he can accumulate extra points paid for by the taxpayers ultimately, because we pay for the trip. Well, wouldn't it have been much more beneficial that if the speaker, who has so much to do and so many responsibilities, got the hell home faster? The fact that we don't talk about stuff like that is ridiculous.
We also, the government, to talk about reform is not just one monolithic thing. We have a state attorney general and a governor who don't get along. We have a state control that doesn't get along with the governor but gets along with the attorney general, who has to sign off on budgets. There are a lot of big moving pieces. And then we have a legislature that's split between D's and R's, and all of them have different ideas about what this should look like. And I remember Governor Cuomo, in his first State of the State, when he was elected, he said, when people say things need to change, they don't mean that I should change, you should change. So the governor is going to say we need to improve things in the legislature, and the legislature is going to say it needs to apply to the governor.
Very quickly, one of the Schneiderman proposals is making these terms for the Assembly and the Senate 4 years instead of 2, so you don't have to go back to the voters that often, you don't have to raise money and run all that.
Without term limits, that's ridiculous. They're still going to raise the same amount of money. They're still going to have the fundraisers. The people who feel like they need access are still going to. Do we believe that they change it from 2 to 4? That this series of fundraisers over the next week, which is $7,500 in total, is going to change? No, they're going to have more fundraisers.
And viewing this through the prism of my utility and what goes on here, I don't want to see fewer races and more drawn out. I want more races every 2 weeks.
Everybody's focused on their self-interest.
No, but I'm not in this case. Is that I would be very happy, quite frankly, if they said, look, for state senate, you have 2 6-year terms. For assembly, you have 3 4-year terms. I'd clap my hands, go home, and say this is a good day for the people of New York. The problem is that, again, we go back to the voters. the voters aren't outraged enough. They don't pay enough attention that they say enough is enough.
It depends on folks back in the district, back at home, threatening to run races based solely on this, but it's a tough thing to motivate on.
And the problem is that when we have these conversations, the vast majority of legislators are really
very
good people. They really are. And that always comes back, and it's seen throughout the elections where they know their constituents. Their constituents say, you know what, I like Mary Smith. She does a good job. They don't look at them as part of this bad system that we have.
That's fair.
I know what your feelings are about
You
that.
already know. I didn't say it. You already know.
All right,
Yes.
now, folks, if you heard an idea you liked from one of these guys or have other suggestions for cleaning up Albany, we want to hear from you. Head to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on today's question. What ethics reforms would you think would clean up Albany? And no, a hazmat team is not an acceptable answer. Up next, this is Election Day in Israel, and as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu scrambles for last-minute votes, he essentially scrapped the notion of a two-state solution with the Palestinians, the same solution the U.S. has backed for more than 20 years. The latest wrench in the U.S.-Israeli relationship is next. Stay with us.